At dinner, Dad said, "Starting next month, you'll pay rent if you want to stay here." Stepmom added, "Maybe it'll teach you some respect." After months of calling me dead weight, I packed my bags. A week later, they called panicking, "Why is your room empty?" Throwaway account because this involves family drama and money. This is a long one, but trust me, it builds to something worth reading. If you've ever dealt with toxic family members who treated you like garbage until they needed something, you'll understand exactly how satisfying this gets. I 26 male now, and this mess started when I was 15. That's when my biological mom died in a car accident. Some idiot ran a red light and hit her on her way home from work at the hospital where she was a nurse. My dad David was completely devastated. And honestly, so was I. Mom was the heart of our family, the one who kept Dad grounded and made our house feel like a home. For 2 years, it was just Dad and me trying to figure out how to live without her. We were both pretty lost. Dad threw himself into his corporate job as a regional sales manager, working longer hours and traveling more. I was dealing with typical teenage grief, but we supported each other the best we could. Then, when I was 17, Dad started dating again. Her name was Brenda. She was 36 at the time, and looking back now, I should have seen the red flags from day one. But Dad seemed happier when she was around, and I thought maybe it would be good for him to have someone. Brenda worked part-time at a nail salon, drove a beat-up Honda with a dented bumper, and lived in a tiny studio apartment across town. She had this way of talking about her life like she was some kind of victim of circumstances, always mentioning how hard things had been for her, how she'd never had anyone take care of her properly. She made my dad feel like some kind of hero swooping in to rescue her from her difficult life. Dad ate it up. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Within 8 months, they were married. I was 18 and honestly pretty naive about relationships, so I figured maybe this was just what Dad needed. Mom had been gone for almost 3 years, and he deserved to be happy again. That was the biggest mistake of my life. The moment Brenda moved into our house, everything changed. This was the house where my mom had painted the walls, chosen the furniture, planted the garden out back. Every room had memories of her in it, but Brenda immediately started making suggestions about redecorating. "This wallpaper is so outdated," she'd say about the kitchen wallpaper Mom had picked out. "We should really modernize this place." "These family photos are kind of depressing," she'd mention about the pictures of Mom on the mantle. "Maybe we should focus on new memories instead of dwelling on the past." Within 2 months, almost everything that reminded us of Mom was gone. Donated to charity, thrown away, or mysteriously disappeared. Dad just went along with it, saying things like, "Brenda's right, we need to move forward," and "It's not healthy to live in the past." I was working part-time at an auto repair shop downtown while finishing high school. I'd always loved working with my hands, and the owner was teaching me everything about engines, transmissions, electrical systems. It was honest work, and I was good at it. The plan was to go to technical school after graduation and become a certified mechanic. But according to Brenda, I was limiting my potential. "Your father has a business degree," she'd say during dinner, her voice dripping with fake concern. "He could help you get a real career, not this blue-collar thing. You're never going to attract a quality woman if your hands are always dirty." Dad, who used to brag to his friends about how proud he was that I could diagnose engine problems at 17, suddenly started acting embarrassed by my career choice. He'd make comments about how I was young and still figuring things out when people asked about my future plans. Brenda had this talent for making everything sound reasonable on the surface, but it was actually poison. "I just want what's best for Jake," she'd tell Dad when she thought I couldn't hear. "He's such a smart boy, but he's setting the bar so low for himself." What she really meant was, "Your son's career choice doesn't match the lifestyle I want to live." About 8 months after they got married, Brenda announced she was pregnant. Dad was absolutely thrilled. He'd always wanted more kids, and losing Mom had put those dreams on hold. He started talking about fresh starts and new beginnings, and how this baby would bring the family together. My half-brother Tyler was born when I was 19. I'll be honest, I loved that kid from the moment I met him. He was innocent in all of this drama, and seeing Dad happy again was worth something. But Brenda immediately started using Tyler as leverage for everything she wanted. "Tyler needs the best possible environment to develop properly," became her catchphrase for justifying every demand. When Tyler was 6 months old, she announced that he needed his own room. "Jake's room gets the best natural light," she told Dad. "Studies show that morning sunlight is crucial for infant brain development." My room. The room I'd lived in for 12 years. The room where Mom used to read me bedtime stories and help me with homework when I was little. Dad actually suggested I move to the basement temporarily, just until we can figure out a better arrangement. I told him absolutely not. And Brenda spent 3 days crying about how I was preventing Tyler from having optimal developmental conditions. That's when I realized this wasn't about the baby's well-being. This was about establishing a hierarchy in the house, and I was being demoted to the bottom. The real campaign against me started around Tyler's first birthday. Brenda had this way of making innocent comments that were actually accusations. Jake never offers to help with Tyler. This usually came right after I'd gotten home from working a 10-hour shift and found her watching TV while Tyler played in his bouncer. Jake doesn't really contribute to household expenses. I was paying $450 a month in rent and buying my own groceries, but somehow this wasn't enough. I'm worried Tyler is going to think it's normal for grown men to live with their parents. Tyler was barely walking and definitely not forming opinions about living arrangements. Every conversation became about how I was somehow failing the family. Dad started looking at me differently, like I was a problem that needed to be solved rather than his son. The worst part was that Brenda was incredibly manipulative about her campaign against me. She had this calculated way of timing her attacks perfectly. She'd wait until Dad and I were having a rare good moment, maybe laughing about something on TV or talking about work. Then she'd interrupt with some concern about me that would immediately shift the mood. "David, honey, I think Jake might be hiding money from us. I saw him putting cash in his dresser drawer yesterday. The cash was my tips from weekend side jobs, money I'd earned legitimately and had every right to keep in my own room. But she made it sound like I was somehow stealing from the family or being deceptive about my finances. David, I'm really worried about Jake's attitude lately. He seems angry all the time, and I'm concerned about how that's affecting Tyler." This usually came right after I'd had any kind of normal human reaction to her constant criticism or unreasonable demands. If I showed even the slightest frustration with her behavior, suddenly I was the problem. "David, do you think it's appropriate for Jake to be walking around the house in just his boxers? I'm trying to maintain some standards here, especially with Tyler getting older." This was about me going from my bedroom to the bathroom in the morning, wearing the same sleepwear I'd worn my entire life. She was trying to make me feel like a creep in my own home. The worst incidents were when she'd make completely false accusations, then play the victim when I defended myself. Once, she told Dad that I'd been inappropriate with her, claiming I'd made some kind of sexual comment. When I furiously denied it and pointed out that I'd been at work during the time she claimed it happened, she started crying and said I was attacking her for trying to keep the family safe. Dad was so completely under her spell by this point that he actually believed her lies over his own son's word. The man who'd raised me, who knew my character, chose to side with a woman he'd known for less than 2 years over the child he'd been with for over 20 years. She had this way of making every conversation about money sound reasonable and family-oriented, but it was actually just greed disguised as concern. "Jake, I know you work hard for your money, but family has to come first. Tyler is going to have so many opportunities ahead of him, and we all need to sacrifice to make sure he gets the best start in life." What she really meant was, your money should fund the lifestyle I want Tyler and me to have, regardless of what it costs you personally. Dad was so infatuated with his new wife and baby that he started believing everything she said. Our relationship, which had been healing after Mom's death, started falling apart again. After I graduated high school, I enrolled in technical school for automotive technology. It was a 2-year program that would give me certifications in everything from basic maintenance to advanced diagnostics. The classes were tough, but I loved them. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building towards something that was mine. I was also working full-time at the repair shop, making $16 an hour as an apprentice. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to pay my rent to Dad, cover my school expenses, and still have a little left over for savings. But Brenda saw my steady income as an opportunity. "Jake, since you're making good money now, don't you think you should contribute more to the household?" she asked one evening, while Dad was giving Tyler a bath. "Tyler's going to need so many things as he grows up. Preschool alone is going to cost us a fortune. I already pay rent and buy my own food," I reminded her. "Yes, but we're a family. Families support each other. Your father and I are talking about putting Tyler in the best preschool in the district. It's $800 a month, but the early childhood development programs there are supposed to be amazing. $800 a month for preschool, for a 2-year-old. It was insane, but I could see where this was heading. "Maybe Tyler would be fine in a regular preschool," I suggested. Brenda's face went cold. "I see. So you think Tyler deserves less than the best because you don't want to help out. That's really disappointing, Jake." When Dad came downstairs, she immediately told him about our conversation, but with her own spin on it. "Jake doesn't think we should invest in Tyler's education," she said, her voice trembling like she was holding back tears. "He thinks regular preschool is good enough for his little brother." Dad looked at me with this expression of disappointment that cut right through me. Jake, Tyler's future is important. I thought you understood that. I never said Tyler's future wasn't important, I protested. I just think $800 a month for preschool is excessive. It's not your decision to make, Brenda snapped. This is about what's best for Tyler, not what's convenient for you. That became the pattern. Brenda would propose some expensive thing for Tyler. I'd question whether it was necessary, and suddenly I was the villain who didn't care about my little brother's well-being. Tyler's bedroom needed custom furniture. Tyler needed organic everything. Tyler needed music lessons, art classes, swimming lessons. Every month brought new expenses, and every month brought new pressure for me to contribute more. I finished technical school with perfect grades and several industry certifications. The repair shop owner offered to promote me to full mechanic at $22 an hour, which was great money for a 21-year-old. I thought finally, Dad would be proud of my accomplishments. Instead, Brenda laughed when I told them about the raise. $22 an hour, she said, like I'd told her I was making minimum wage. That's cute. Your father makes almost 4 times that much. When are you going to start thinking about a real career? The comment stung. But what hurt more was that Dad just sat there nodding along. By the time I was 23, I'd been working as a full mechanic for 2 years and had saved up about $15,000. I was also doing side jobs on weekends, fixing cars for neighbors and coworkers in our garage. Word was spreading that I was reliable and reasonably priced. That's when I started thinking about starting my own business. The idea was simple: mobile mechanics. Instead of people having to bring their cars to a shop and wait around for hours, I'd come to them. House calls, office parking lots, wherever was convenient. There was clearly demand for it, and the startup costs weren't too crazy. I'd need a van, tools, insurance, licensing, and probably about $35,000 total to get started properly. I had part of it saved, and I was looking into small business loans for the rest. When I mentioned the idea to Dad and Brenda, their reactions were completely different than I'd expected. Dad actually seemed interested. That's not a bad idea, Jake. Mobile services are really popular now. People value convenience. But Brenda immediately started finding problems with it. What if something goes wrong with a customer's car? Won't you be liable for that? And how will people know you're legitimate if you don't have a real shop? Plus, what about when you get older? You can't be crawling around under cars forever. Every concern she raised was something I'd already thought about and had solutions for. But she kept pushing. Honestly, Jake, it sounds like you're trying to avoid getting a real job. Your father has connections in the business world. He could help you get started in sales or management. Something with growth potential. I don't want to work in sales, I said. I like working on cars. But think about your future family, she pressed. What kind of woman wants to marry someone whose career peaked at fixing cars? You need to think bigger. Dad jumped in to support her. Jake, Brenda has a point. You're smart and capable. Maybe you should consider using those skills in a more professional environment. It was like they couldn't understand that I genuinely enjoyed what I did and was good at it. In their minds, anything that didn't require a college degree was automatically inferior. But I wasn't deterred. I spent months developing a business plan, researching the market, getting quotes for everything I'd need. By my 24th birthday, I was ready to take the leap. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in March. Tyler was almost 5, and Brenda had been ramping up the pressure on me to contribute more money to the household. Tyler's going to start kindergarten next year, she announced during dinner. We want to send him to St. Matthew's Academy. It's the best private school in the area. St. Matthew's Academy. I looked it up later, and tuition was $18,000 a year. That's a lot of money, I said carefully. It's an investment in Tyler's future, Dad said firmly. The education there will set him up for success in life. Or what does this have to do with me? I asked, though I already knew. Brenda leaned forward. Well, as Tyler's big brother, we were hoping you'd want to help with his education costs. Maybe $400 a month to start. $400 a month. On top of the $450 I was already paying in rent. That would take up most of my take-home pay and completely kill my business savings. I can't afford that, I said honestly. I'm trying to save money to start my business. Brenda's expression hardened. Your business? Jake, you're 24 years old. When are you going to stop playing around with this car mechanic fantasy and grow up? It's not a fantasy. I have a real business plan. I've done the research. I have most of the startup money saved. You have $15,000 in a savings account, she said dismissively. That's not real money. That's what some people spend on a vacation. Brenda, Dad said quietly. That's not fair. But she was on a roll now. No, David. Someone needs to be honest with him. Jake, You're living in a fantasy world. You think you're going to become some successful business owner by fixing cars? You're deluding yourself. She stood up and started pacing around the kitchen. Do you know what real successful people drive? They don't drive beat-up trucks and work with their hands. They wear suits and make decisions and build careers that matter. My career matters to me, I said. Your career? She laughed. Jake, you work in a garage. That's not a career, that's a job. And not even a good job. You're never going to make real money, you're never going to attract a quality partner, and you're certainly never going to be able to help support this family the way you should. The room went completely silent, except for Tyler playing with his toys in the living room. Dad cleared his throat. Jake, maybe it is time to think about next steps. You can't live here forever. And if you're not going to help with family expenses, what are you saying? I asked. Brenda answered for him. We're saying that if you want to continue living in this house, you need to start paying real rent. $1,200 a month, plus contributing to Tyler's education fund. $1,200. That was almost my entire take-home pay. That's not rent, I said. That's you trying to force me out. No one's forcing anything, Dad said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. We're just asking you to contribute fairly to the household you're part of. I looked around the kitchen where Mom used to pack my school lunches, where she used to help me with homework at the table, where Dad used to tell me he was proud of how hard I worked. You want me gone, I said quietly. We want you to step up, Brenda said. But if you're not willing to do that, then yes, maybe it's time for you to find your own place. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling for hours. I thought about Mom and what she would think about this situation. I thought about all the money I'd contributed to this house, all the times I'd helped with Tyler, all the sacrifices I'd made to be a good son and brother, and I realized that none of it mattered to them. Brenda saw me as either a source of income or an obstacle to remove. Dad was too caught up in his new life to remember that I was his son too. By morning, I'd made my decision. I didn't make any dramatic announcements. I just started quietly planning my exit. First, I found a studio apartment across town. It was small but clean, and the rent was $750 a month. I could afford it on my mechanic's salary, and I'd still have money left over to keep saving for my business. Second, I opened a new bank account that only I had access to. I'd been keeping my money in an account that Dad had helped me set up when I was younger, and technically he was still a co-signer. I moved everything to the new account. Third, I started moving my stuff out gradually. A few boxes at a time, things that wouldn't be missed immediately. My tools, my important documents, my clothes. I told Dad and Brenda I was organizing my room and donating things I didn't need anymore. It took me 2 weeks to move everything important. On a Friday night, while Dad was at a work conference and Brenda was at book club, I packed the last of my belongings and left my house key on the kitchen counter. I didn't leave a note explaining where I was going or why. I figured they'd made their position pretty clear. Saturday morning, my phone started ringing. Dad had come home and found my empty room. When I didn't answer, he started texting. Jake, where are you? Your room is empty. What's going on? Call me back immediately. We need to talk about this. This is ridiculous. Come home and let's discuss this like adults. I finally called him back Sunday evening. Jake, thank God. Where are you? We've been worried sick. I'm fine, Dad. I found my own place. Your own place? Jake, you didn't have to move out. We can work something out. No, Dad, we can't. You made it clear that I'm not welcome there unless I pay more money than I can afford. That's not what we said. That's exactly what you said. $1,200 in rent plus contributing to Tyler's private school. You knew I couldn't afford that. There was a long pause. Jake, come home. Let's sit down and figure this out. I am home, Dad. This is my home now. I could hear Brenda in the background asking what I was saying. Jake, Dad continued, you're being irrational. You can't just run away from your family. I'm not running away from anything. I'm 24 years old and I moved into my own apartment. That's what normal adults do. But what about Tyler? He's been asking where you are. That one hit hard. Tell Tyler I love him and I'll see him soon. I hung up and turned off my phone. Living on my own was the best decision I'd ever made. For the first time in years, I could come home and not worry about being criticized or asked for money. I could make my own food, watch what I wanted on TV, and most importantly, focus completely on building my business. I used my savings and a small business loan to buy a used van and outfit it with everything I needed for mobile repairs. I got all the proper licensing and insurance, created business cards and a simple website, and started advertising my services. The response was immediate and overwhelming. It turns out a lot of people hate taking their cars to shops and waiting around for hours. Business owners loved that I could fix their fleet vehicles right in their parking lots. Busy parents appreciated that I could change their oil while they were at work. Within 6 months, I was booked solid and had to start turning down jobs. Within a year, I hired my first employee, another mechanic who was tired of working for someone else. Within 18 months, I had 3 employees and was looking into buying a second van. My business, Jake's Mobile Mechanics, was growing faster than I'd ever imagined possible. Meanwhile, I was hearing through mutual acquaintances that Dad and Brenda were struggling financially. Dad's company had gone through layoffs and cut his salary by 15%. Tyler was in expensive private school. Brenda had gotten used to a certain lifestyle, and their mortgage payments were apparently crushing them. I learned all this through my neighbor, an elderly woman who was friends with Dad's neighbor. These women talked to each other daily and shared everything that was happening in the neighborhood. Your father had to sell Brenda's fancy car, my neighbor told me while I was changing the oil in her car. She's driving some little economy car now and complaining to everyone about it. I just smiled and kept working. And I heard they're 3 months behind on their mortgage, she continued. The bank sent them some kind of notice. Very stressful situation. Part of me felt bad for Dad, but a bigger part of me felt like this was exactly what they'd asked for. They'd prioritized Brenda's expensive tastes over financial stability, and now they were dealing with the consequences. By my 25th birthday, my business had grown beyond my wildest dreams. What started as one guy with a van had transformed into a legitimate operation that was dominating the mobile repair market in our area. I had 6 full-time employees, all certified mechanics who were grateful to escape the traditional shop environment. We operated 3 fully equipped vans, each one a rolling garage complete with diagnostic computers, hydraulic lifts, and every tool needed for major repairs. The business model was proving incredibly profitable. We charged premium rates because customers valued the convenience, but our overhead was a fraction of what traditional shops paid. No expensive retail space, no massive utility bills, no customer waiting areas to maintain. Just skilled technicians and quality service delivered wherever the customer needed it. I'd secured maintenance contracts with 3 major companies in town, handling everything from their delivery trucks to executive vehicles. We were doing regular maintenance on over 200 vehicles monthly, and word-of-mouth referrals kept bringing in new individual customers daily. I was clearing about $180,000 a year personally, and conservative estimates put the business value at over $300,000. The best part was watching my bank account grow every month. After years of being told I'd never amount to anything, seeing those numbers climb gave me a satisfaction that went beyond money. It was validation that my instincts had been right, that hard work and smart decisions mattered more than college degrees and corporate connections. I celebrated my 25th by buying myself a brand new Ford F-350 pickup truck, fully loaded with every option available, metallic black paint with chrome accents, leather interior, and the most powerful engine Ford offered. It was absolutely beautiful and completely unnecessary for my daily needs, but I didn't care. It cost $68,000, and I paid cash without even thinking about it. Walking into that dealership and writing a check for the full amount felt like the ultimate middle finger to everyone who doubted me. I hadn't spoken to Dad in over a year when he called me last month. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Jake," he said, and his voice sounded exhausted. "How are you, son?" "I'm good, Dad. Business is going well." "That's great to hear. Really great. Listen, I was wondering if you'd like to come to dinner this Sunday. Brenda's making her lasagna, and Tyler keeps asking about his big brother. Tyler asking about me. That got to me. The kid was 7 now, and I'd missed so much of his life because of all this drama. Sure, Dad. I'll be there. Sunday came, and I pulled up to the house in my new truck. The same house where I'd grown up, where Mom had lived, where I'd been made to feel unwelcome. It looked smaller than I remembered, and I noticed the lawn needed work. Brenda answered the door, and I could see her eyes immediately go to the truck in the driveway. Her fake smile was so forced it looked painful. "Jake! Oh my goodness, look at you. You look so successful." Tyler came running and wrapped his arms around my legs. "Jake, Dad says you have your own business now." "That's right, buddy. I fix cars just like I used to do in our garage." We sat down for dinner, and I could feel both Dad and Brenda studying me. I was wearing nice clothes, I looked healthy and confident, and there was no hiding the fact that I was doing well for myself. "So, Jake," Brenda said, cutting her lasagna with surgical precision, "business must be really good if you can afford a truck like that." "It's doing well. That truck had to cost at least $60,000, Dad added. "Something like that." Brenda's eyes lit up like she'd won the lottery. $60,000! My goodness, Jake, you must be making really good money now. I could practically see the calculations running through her head. "Actually," Dad said, That's perfect timing. We wanted to talk to you about something. And there it was. The real reason for the dinner invitation. We're going through a rough patch financially, Dad continued. My company had layoffs, and with Tyler's school costs, the mortgage, everything else, it's been really tough. Brenda jumped in immediately. We were hoping that maybe, since you're obviously doing so well now, you could help us out, just temporarily, until we get back on our feet. What kind of help? I asked, though I already knew. Well, Brenda said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, we're about 4 months behind on the mortgage. If we don't catch up soon, we could lose the house. Tyler would have to change schools, and you know how disruptive that would be for him. Using Tyler again. Of course. How much are we talking about? I asked. Dad looked uncomfortable. About $18,000 to catch up on what we owe, and maybe another $2,500 a month going forward, just until I can find a better position or get my old salary back. I sat back in my chair and looked around the dining room. The same dining room where they'd told me I needed to pay $1,200 in rent or move out, where Brenda had called my career dreams a fantasy. That's a significant amount of money, I said carefully. Jake? Brenda leaned forward, and her voice took on that manipulative tone I remembered so well. I know we've had our differences in the past, but we're family. Tyler adores you. You're his big brother, and he talks about you all the time. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost insulting, but I played along. This is a big decision, I said. I need some time to think about it. But, of course, Dad said, relief flooding his voice. Take all the time you need. We're just so grateful that you're even considering it. After dinner, I hugged Tyler goodbye and promised I'd see him again soon. That was the only genuine moment of the entire evening. I told them I'd call them in a week with my answer. I spent exactly 7 days thinking about their request. 7 days remembering every insult, every dismissive comment, every time they'd made me feel like I wasn't good enough. I thought about how they'd kicked me out of my own home because I wouldn't subsidize their lifestyle, how they'd called my career a fantasy while I was building a successful business, how they'd had zero contact with me for over a year until they needed money. I thought about Tyler and how much I loved that kid despite everything. But I also thought about how Dad and Brenda had made their choices, and Tyler was going to have to live with the consequences of their financial irresponsibility. On Thursday evening, I called Dad back. Jake, he answered immediately. I was hoping you'd call. Have you had a chance to think about what we discussed? I have, Dad, and I've made my decision. Oh, thank goodness. You have no idea how much this means to us. I'm not going to give you any money. Silence. What did you say? You heard me correctly. I'm not giving you a penny. Jake, please, think about Tyler. I have thought about Tyler. I've also thought about how you and Brenda treated me for years. How you made me feel worthless and unwelcome in my own home. How you kicked me out because I wouldn't pay extortionate rent. Jake, that's not what happened. That's exactly what happened, Dad. Don't try to rewrite history now that you need something from me. I could hear Brenda in the background, asking what I was saying. Let me make this very clear, I continued. 3 years ago, you told me I needed to pay $1,200 a month in rent plus contribute to Tyler's private school, or move out. You knew I couldn't afford that. You wanted me gone, so I left. We didn't want you gone. Yes, you did. Brenda called my career a fantasy. She said I'd never make real money or attract a quality partner. She made it clear that I was an embarrassment to this family. Jake, Dad's voice was getting desperate now. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed. We were going through a difficult time financially. And now you're going through another difficult time financially, and suddenly you want my help. Interesting how that works. What do you want me to say? That we made mistakes? Fine, we made mistakes. But you're my son, and we need your help. Here's what I want you to understand, Dad. When you chose Brenda's demands over your relationship with me, you lost the right to call me for help. When you stood by while she insulted everything I'd worked for, you burned that bridge. Jake, please, I'm not finished. Do you want to know how much my business is worth now? Over $500,000. Do you want to know how much money I made last year? More than you and Brenda combined. The career she called a fantasy has made me more successful than either of you ever imagined possible. Complete silence on the other end. But here's the thing, Dad. Success isn't just about money. It's about dignity. It's about being respected for who you are and what you do. And you took that away from me for years. We can fix this, Dad said, and I could hear that he was crying. We can work this out. No, we can't, because I don't trust you anymore. I don't trust that you won't side with Brenda the next time she decides I'm not good enough. I don't trust that you value me as your son rather than as a potential source of income. What about Tyler? Tyler is going to learn a valuable lesson about consequences. Maybe going to public school and living in a smaller house will teach him that actions have results. Maybe it'll be good for him to understand that money doesn't grow on trees. Jake, Brenda had taken the phone now. We're sorry. We were wrong about everything. Please don't let Tyler suffer because of our mistakes. You should have thought about Tyler before you spent years driving his big brother away. You should have considered his well-being before you prioritized private schools over financial stability. We'll lose everything, she said. And she was crying too now. Then lose it. Sell the house. Move into an apartment. Get full-time jobs. Do what millions of other families do when they can't afford their lifestyle. But don't call me expecting to be rescued from problems you created. I took a deep breath. This is the last conversation we're going to have about money. Don't call me asking for help with the mortgage or Tyler's school or anything else. You made your choices. Now live with them. Jake, Dad had taken the phone back. You're my son. I love you. Then you should have acted like it when it mattered. I hung up and turned off my phone. The next day, my neighbor knocked on my door with the latest gossip from the old neighborhood. She was practically vibrating with excitement about the drama unfolding at Dad's house. Big moving truck at your father's house this morning, she announced, settling into my kitchen chair like she was about to deliver a performance. Professional movers, not one of those U-Haul situations. Looks like they're really clearing out. Do you know where they're going? I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew the answer. 2-bedroom apartment over by the mall, she said, with barely concealed glee. You know, that complex where all the young families live when they're just starting out. The one with the tiny balconies and paper-thin walls. The irony was absolutely perfect. They were moving to exactly the kind of place Brenda had always looked down on. The kind of place she'd driven past and made snide comments about the people who couldn't do better for themselves. I heard Brenda was crying on the front lawn yesterday while they were packing, my neighbor continued. Very dramatic scene. She kept saying something about how this wasn't supposed to happen, how they were supposed to be moving up in the world, not down. I couldn't help but smile at that image. Brenda, who had spent years talking about status and appearances and quality people, was now living the exact life she'd spent so much energy trying to avoid. And Tyler? I asked, because I genuinely cared about how this was affecting him. Poor little guy seemed confused by all the chaos, but kids are resilient, you know? He'll probably adjust just fine to Roosevelt Elementary. Same school you went to, right? Roosevelt Elementary. The same public school that had prepared me for technical school and eventually for running my own successful business. The school that had taught me the value of hard work and practical skills over empty status symbols. Maybe Tyler would learn the same lessons I had. Maybe going to public school with kids from all different backgrounds would teach him empathy and resilience that no expensive private academy could provide. Maybe living in a smaller apartment would help him understand that happiness doesn't come from having the biggest house or the fanciest things. Over the following weeks, I heard more updates through the neighborhood network. Dad had taken a second job working evenings at a big box store to help make ends meet. Brenda was working full-time now at a different nail salon, one that required actual productivity instead of treating her like she was doing them a favor by showing up. They were living paycheck to paycheck for the first time in years, learning what it felt like to worry about money the way most normal families do. Learning to shop at discount grocery stores and clip coupons and decide whether they could afford things like cable TV and restaurant meals.